So the InDesign Quick Start tutorial and the Adobe Activity Designing a Flyer, which really should give you all the basics that you would possibly need for creating these creative resumes. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is open up some of the creative resumes from last semester and just give them each a quick critique and talk about the strengths and weaknesses of each one. These aren't necessarily all, they wouldn't all be A's. In general, I'm grading with some leeway just because this is the first time the students are used InDesign. So I'm not expecting perfection, but I'm expecting effort to try to work creatively and to get everything into InDesign and looking pretty decent. So this, let me come back to that one. So here's one, and again, so on Tuesday I'll show you how to get two different versions in the same PDF. You don't have to worry about that now. For Tuesday, you just have to go to InDesign and go to PDF presets and just choose the option for high quality print. And I'll show you at the end of this how to do that. So in this one here, I like the fonts. So here is examples of the icon this student made is here. So she exported that as a image about this size, a square, and placed it in here. And then also with here's her monogram. And I think in this student she had um, one of these was different in terms of the color. I think this one originally in the Illustrator activities was a blue color, and so she went and got the same skew, the same gradient to throw in there in InDesign, and then export it as a GIF or a PNG to put in here. So for your monograms and your icons, you might choose to do a little bit of editing in Photoshop first to get them ready to put them in Photoshop. I'm sorry, in InDesign. So basically, you're editing InDesign and then save as a PNG in InDesign. I'm sorry, in Illustrator. So you make the revisions to Illustrator, export as a PNG, and then you come into Illustrator to your creative resumes and place it and find that PNG to place. Uh, for this, I like the spacing of the words. The fonts are not too complex. I like having the same blue as in her name. I do think that there would be well served to have a little bit more division, like maybe kind of a column that's all the way down here, because all these different kind of subheaders are kind of floating around. Um, so, for example, in the second version, she experimented with that. I think generally it probably is more useful to have one side to be white. Um, and probably my biggest critique is that the fonts, the text, are coming right up against that line. So remember, space is one of our design principles. And this font is actually pretty big. I'm guessing that this is like 16 or maybe even 18. So it's really big. And so you can make it smaller. And if you want, when you're working on something, print it out and just see what does it look like when you print it out, because we're kind of more used to looking at this kind of thing when it's actually print out as opposed to on the screen. But yeah, I don't like how it's so close. It's really bunching up onto this line. If I just make it smaller and moving the whole text, the whole frame that the text is in, just moving that about 10 pixels or whatever over with all of this and maybe down, I think it would make it feel like it's not so crowded. And then also, in this, it looks like she exported it as a PNG without a thinking about the background. I'm sorry, as a GIF. So sometimes if you see this pixelated thing when it comes in, then just go back to Illustrator, export your monogram as a PNG, and there you shouldn't have that problem. Okay, So next one, here we go. We have the two versions here. Spend some time with typography. Spend some time with the different fonts that are available in InDesign and how big you want them to be. So this is a nice, elegant font. The student made this for the Illustrator activities, and so put that in there. Remember that you are required to put at least one monogram and one icon in your so we have her monogram down here. So the monograms don't necessarily have to be at the top. Think about balance, and this is kind of balancing out how the design is top heavy up here. These boxes in the critique, she didn't have so these, all you're doing is setting the border on the frames. So remember, in InDesign you can see the frame borders, but unless you go in and click on the object settings and say I want there to be a border of maybe, this looks like maybe 2 pixels, black border. There's a couple different border settings you can play around with, but before in the critiques they weren't here, and someone said, well, it looks like things are kind of floating around and there's not as much organization, so she put these bounding boxes, these borders around. These are 2 icons also that she made in the InDesign. I'm sorry, in the Illustrator activity. And then she's playing around with a different design here. Okay, again using the column with a different color to kind of add some kind of organizational aspect. She has her profile picture there. I think these fonts are super big. I think if she made them a little bit smaller and maybe a crowd around with the subheaders being a little bit more bold, that the design might be a little bit tighter, and maybe putting something like her monogram up top here, moving everything down, and the 2 icons would be better for balance. This one here, let's start at the top. This is another column design. So, this is a lot of text to have all of these different text areas to be center aligned, and it starts to look kind of like a little sloppy. So in general, other than the subheaders, I mean, the subheaders are fine to be centered, but then once we have these, which would be nice if they were bulleted, then I would just go ahead and left align them within the text frame. And then probably my biggest critique is this is kind of just thrown in here. Granted, she's required to have an icon in here, but I would bring it over here to this blue area, because all this space, like, what's the design reason for having all this empty space? I mean, it's okay to have empty space sometimes, but there should be a design reason for it. So I would just go ahead and put that over here and make it bigger. And then maybe she could move some of her text down. Some of this could be bigger in the font. And then over here too, the general idea I think is fine, but the alignment's kind of odd. So the name here should be pretty much right in the center. It seems like it's pushed over to the left some. And I think this is an interesting kind of experiment with columns and division, and that's all good. But notice how this E here is right up against this border line. The spacing over here on this side is much better, and I'm not sure why on this side the fonts or the text seems kind of to be not really thought about in terms of how the spacing is working out. This is a nice one. A good use of the of turning your profile picture into black or white. And I like the border division here. Her name really pops out with some contrast here. And yeah, overall good. This could be a little bit larger. Her icon. And then down here, her second version, kind of just playing around. Really my only critique here. I do like the colors. I like the fonts. I really like her monogram up here. this could be probably a little bit larger, her two icons that she made. Probably my only critique is that right here, the words are really mushing up right against the edge of this border here. So I would push that over a little bit. Just look at a couple more. So this is a different design, and in terms of creativity, I like it a lot. There's some parts that I think work better. I think this is really great use of space. This, I think, you have all the space down here. I would make the fonts the sizes a little bit bigger. On this one here, they're very small. This looks great. Activities and awards. And probably the only thing I would critique is over here. The spacing is kind of awkward with the contact information. Like I think it should be down here in the center. And then also there's some weird stuff kind of going around experimenting with the name. And experimentation is fine. Sometimes when you're trying to be creative, it takes a while to get it right. But I like the creativity here, and I like the color scheme as well. Here's another column design. For this one, I would just work more. These fonts look really small, and kind of just the alignment looks really awkward. The color scheme is good. Having the line here, there's lots of different lines and different art in InDesign that you can throw in there, but I'm not sure why this one's here when there's already a border with the column. This one I really like the header, so I like the monogram kind of comes out and produces her name. So you can play around with that to get the right effect that you want. And then probably my biggest critique. And then we have the one of our icons. I think that could be bigger. And then playing around with some of the fonts and making them a little bit smaller. But I do really like the header over here in this one. And I like the use of color. The monogram fits really well in this this column here, and she really brings the color over well on this right hand side with her name. I really like the control of the text and the different categories here because it looks really tight. Really nice use of space. This is actually her graphic that she was playing around with, so it's pretty small. So maybe moving some of this over to be able to make it a little bit bigger over here. But overall, I like this design. So yeah, so that's just some examples there of what you can do. So remember that you need to have a monogram and icon from your illustrators activities in your different creative resumes, but you definitely can. You don't have to go with exactly what you did in the Illustrator activities. So depending on what you're planning to do, you can go through and change colors and play around and make the monograms fit with whatever you're trying to do in your creative resumes. So that's it for now. I want to keep this short so you can spend more time actually starting to work on your creative resumes. You really don't need to get any additional assets other than deciding what from your resumes in terms of the text, like the categories and the information to use, because you already have your profile pictures. You already have the profile pictures are optional, like you saw some really good uses of them. So I would not discourage using them. They're not required, but it's definitely an option. But you need to have a monogram in each one and an icon in each one.